This week, Vice President Dr. Mahmoud Bawumia washed his hands off completely from all the shortcomings of President Akufo-Addo's government, or so some people have said, declaring as a man of his own, he has his own vision. The Vice President, who is running for president on the ticket of the governing New Patriotic Party in the upcoming 2024 election, announced a raft of new policies, many of which runs counter to the programs and policies being implemented by the government of Nana Akufo-Addo, of which he is the second in command. Dr. Bawumia clearly does not agree with the decision to impose a number of taxes, including the emission levy, e-levy, and VAT on electricity, promising to scrap them if he is elected president of Ghana. A number of questions have come up, and we examine them tonight on Ghana Connect.
Fishermen are suffering and men are suffering. Women are suffering and children and Ghanaians as a whole are suffering. You can engage in all the propaganda you want, but if the fundamentals are weak, the exchange rate will expose you. Under my administration, there will be no taxes on digital payments. The e-levy will therefore be abolished.
Now all those who contributed to the mess are trying to run away as if they were not part of it. People have begun saying, oh, they were not in charge, they were not listening to them and all that. All of them, they inside. Jack Toronto and all his small brothers, all of them are part of the mess that we're going through.
On the show, we ask, do you trust Dr. Mahmoud Bawumia, Vice President, to do all the things he has promised to do if he is elected president? And why is he not getting the current government he is part of to implement them now? And finally, what does this all say about the current government? Is this an admission of failure? And has Dr. Bawumia thrown his party and government under the bus? We connect right after this break.
Water is needed all day, all night. So, remember Syntex tank all day, all night. 7 years warranty. Select any color for free. In no de crack, in no de spoil. Call Accra on 0244 335 168. Kumasi 0505 555 666. Syntex tank. A strong, a tough. Water is needed all day, all night. So, remember Syntex tank all day, all night. 7 years warranty. Select any color for free. In no de crack, in no de spoil. Call Accra on 0244 335 168. Kumasi 0505 555 666. Syntex tank. A strong, a tough.
Central University, Ghana's leading private Christian university, has open admissions. Apply now for a degree in environmental engineering, fashion design, landscape design, interior design, business administration, economics, law, civil engineering, architecture, computer science, IT, theology, and many others. Degrees are available on our campuses in Mutual, ICGC Christ Temple, Abosokai, and Kumasi. Also enroll in our MBA with various specializations. Scholarships are available for needy but brilliant students. Call us on 0303 318 583 or visit our website at central.edu.gh for more information. Central University, raising transformational leaders through faith, integrity, and excellence. Beyond the star.
Good evening and welcome back to Ghana Connect. So tonight on the show, we ask, do you trust Dr. Bawumia to do all the things he has promised to do? And does all this that he is talking about, does it expose the grim reality of what we are facing now, as Papa Ni would like to say? We connect with some brilliant minds, but first you have to listen to this.
Suffering, contractors are suffering, civil servants are suffering, and farmers are suffering. Fishermen are suffering, and men are suffering. Women are suffering, and children and Ghanaians as a whole are suffering. engage in all the propaganda you want, but if the fundamentals are weak, the exchange rate will expose you.
The city has appreciated in value. When we came in, it was run. We have arrested it. and the IGP has the keys. He's locked it up. We've arrested. Look at the economic management team. It is quite clearly a fantastic team. Professor Jambafo, Dr. Akutose, Dr. Afriye Akoto, Honorable Alan Chiramanting, Boachi Ejaku, Ken Oforiata, Senior Minister Yao Osafo Mafu. What a solid team.
To use electronic channels of payment. To accomplish this, under my administration, there will be no taxes on digital payments. The e-levy will therefore be abolished. The new policies that I am proposing to implement in 2025 will give us the fiscal space to eliminate some taxes, such as the proposed VAT on electricity, if they are still on the books, the emissions tax, and the betting tax, without compromising our fiscal deficit.
Ministers, mostly in the economic sector, and some advisors come together, examine memos that may come before it, and go to cabinet with some recommendations. Some of those recommendations may be accepted, some of them may not be accepted. At the end of the day, cabinet will then proffer advice to the president. Our cabinet here in Ghana is an advisory body.
Now all those who contributed to the mess are trying to run away as if they were not part of it. People have begun saying, oh, they were not in charge, they were not listening to them and all that. All of them, they inside. Jack Toronto and all his small brothers, all of them are part of the mess that we're going through. None of them can escape responsibility. None of them.
I think that Dr. Bawumia is clearly confused. He's lost directions, he's lost focus. The deception is no longer working. And I think that this new trick is just what it is, a trick.
That is what the minorities say about the vice president's speech the other time. They call it a trick. And this is how we begin the conversation. Connecting with me, I have some really brilliant minds to help me discuss this. Julius Kwame Anthony is the former NUK's General Secretary and also an activist. Julius, it's good to have you back on the show today.
Thank you very much, Kwaku.
Well, I've also been joined in studio by Kwesi Botry. Kwesi Botry is a communicator. Kwesi, good to have you.
Kwaku, good to be here.
Well, Kwesi is a regular on the show, but this is the first time he's joining us in studio. It's good to have him connect with us. Emmanuel Owuswe J is a Ghanaian studying in the United States. Emmanuel, good evening and thanks for connecting with us.
Hi, Kwaku. A very good evening to you and your listeners as well. And thank you very much for having me.
And then introducing to the show, Alfred is a data analyst and has been analyzing some of the data Dr. Bawumia put out in his speech. If you're on Twitter, you'll see some of the key data he put out. Alfred, good to have you join us.
Good evening, Kwaku. I hope you can hear me. And good evening to your listeners as well. Thanks for having me.
Right. So, Alfred, I want to start right from you. I mean, you've been poring over the data that Dr. Mahmoud Bawumia put out. What are your general impressions about what he says he's going to do vis-a-vis what he's doing now, and the reality, the feasibility of it all, and the general sense you get listening to the vice president?
Well, thanks. I think when you look at I want to talk about the taxes, right? The ones that he says he's creating the fiscal space and he's going to be able to abolish them. I think it's possible to do those, right? And when you look at the fundamental thing here is really about fiscal consolidation, right? And from a policy perspective, there are two levers. Like either you do a combination of increasing revenue and reducing spending, right? And so when he says that he is going to be able to create a fiscal space to abolish these taxes, you look at the fiscal impacts of those taxes. For example, the gambling and the emissions tax alone, according to government, is supposed to generate about 0.13% of GDP. So in monetary terms, that's about 793 million if we're using, say, 2022 GDP numbers. So that is about 793 million. But there are other parts of the economy that can be touched. And one of them that I can think of is, as a low-hanging fruit, is expenditure rationalization and expenditure management. So if you look at how much money is spent on things like allowances, right? So if you look at even government allowances, I give you an example. In 2022, the government spent 915 million cedis on what I call frivolous allowances, like fuel allowances, housing allowances, those kinds of allowances. So go back to the 0.13% of GDP that I said was 793 million cedis. They're right now. Like if you get rid of those allowances, you have that fiscal space. So I think it's possible to do that. But I think the question is there the political will to do that? That's a big question. And even though the vice president said it in a speech, when he becomes president, does he have the political will? Because these allowances are also enjoyed by people at the very top of the civil service and even in the political space. So is the political will to remove those allowances? Is that going to be there? And is that going to plug the hole when you get rid of those revenue measures that you're talking about? That would be the big question that has to be answered. But I think a lot of these revenue measures he's talking about by themselves are not contributing very significantly. And so they can easily be removed. E-levy has failed. Like everybody knows, E-levy has failed. The government poorly designed it. It has failed. So getting rid of it, to me, it's just a low-hanging fruit.
Good. Great point then to bring Julius in. And I'll come in with you. I'll check in with you a bit from now to get a perspective on all these things. But Julius, the vice president says he's going to do all these now. We've heard from Kojo Nkrumah tell us about the role of the EMT as an advisory body. Mm-hmm. The vice president clearly disagrees with some of these, and if he can't get his way, he's saying that if you elect me, then I can do that. It is when he's the figurehead that you can hold him accountable for all this.
I'm glad you started with the Honorable Kojo Nkrumah. The vice president and his enablers are all frauds, and the reason why they are frauds is because how do you, when it is convenient
how can you accuse them of?
They are frauds, and I'm going to justify it. So if you would allow me. How would you, when it's convenient for you, be mute on your opinion on a certain thing? And the reason why I said I'm glad you brought in the Honorable Kojo Nkrumah is because the Honorable Kojo Nkrumah on City FM was queried on whether or not the vice president was against the e-levy. He emphatically stated that nobody, as far as he is concerned, is against the e-levy. And that in conversations, people may express their, contrary opinions to one thing or the other, but upon concluding on the policy, they were all at idem on it. Then in another voice, the same vice president now says that he's against it and they were going to scrap it. And we have that, information minister using the official handle of the information ministry to post contrary statements to something he himself said on public radio. So you see, this is a fraudulent and, let me say, opportunistic act of the vice president. The reason being that, one, the vice president has come to realize that all these policies, including the taxes they've introduced last year and this year, are unpopular and they are going to work against the New Patriotic Party government, including he himself. And suddenly he wants to dissociate from them and paint himself as someone who is outside of government so that we vote for him. I heard Ampem conveniently talked about how the taxes could be removed without touching on the credibility of the person who is offering those solutions to us. Where was the person in the run-up to these decisions, in the implementation of these taxes? We have members of parliament of this same government who went on to impose this tax. They went to fight for it. And to remove the tax, you need them. Is Ampem aware of that? That you need members of parliament to remove the tax, because taxes are imposed by legislation and you need legislation to repeal legislations. So the same people who went to fight to impose the thing were the same people who were giving standing ovations to the vice president when he is promising to remove the taxes in exchange for votes. This is fraud. And when we talk about how fraudulent the conduct of this vice president and his eneblers are, then they tell us that he has his own vision.
Because you have a legal background. You understand that.
It is fraud.
Fraud. It's almost, you are saying that the vice president is passing off as somebody he is not.
Yes, he is passing off as somebody he is not. But the vice president.
That is your opinion on that.
Of course, I'm here to express my opinion.
But your opinion about fraud is of a certain standard, and if you can prove that, and if you can get that,
what is more fraudulent? What is more fraudulent than I tell you in one voice?
We can use another one. You use the word opportunistic. Why don't you stick with that?
It's fraudulent. It is fraudulent for a person to tell me in the morning that this thing is what works, it brings people into the tax net, this is what the e-levy is about and all that, and then another voice come and tell me that he's against it in exchange for changing it, I'm supposed to vote for him. That is fraud. Kwaku Asante, let's call fraud a fraud. It's as simple as that. The vice president's conduct in the morning tell us that the intention of the e-levy and the members of parliament who supported the e-levy told us that the intention is because they wanted to bring more people into the tax net. That was the justification they gave for it. Then another voice, that same vice president, together with members of the same party, who told us they were going to do that to include people in the tax, and now tell us that they have realized that it is a wrong thing. But all along, the vice president was not in favor of it. And that if we vote for him to become president, it is fraud, Kwaku Asante. There's no other way of putting it. It's as simple as that. It is fraud. The act of now coming to be opportunistic. Because you see, when you look at the conduct of this vice president, when he was running in 2016, he knew very well the role of a vice president. The vice president is a PhD holder. He, more than anyone, reads better than I can do. He knows the role of the vice president in this constitution. But when he was making the promises, he was very emphatic. Promising senior high schools, promising moving from taxation to production. If you make these promises and you tell us that you do not have the power to do it, if at the time you told us these things you were aware that you did not have the power to do it, yet you told us you were going to do it, and then when you failed in doing it, you are telling us that now we must vote for you to become the main head to be able to do it. Kwaku, is fraud. How again is fraud defined? Okay. If you know very well something is not the case, but you told us it is the case.
Well, what did the vice president say is the case?
The vice president told us that he was going to move this country from taxation to production. Yes. There's video evidence of that. You have it.
And he's not the president of Ghana. He's the vice president of Ghana.
But he told us he was going to do it anyway. So if you know full well, Kwaku Asante, if you know full well you are incapable of doing something, and you tell somebody that you are going to do it, is that not fraud?
No, Julius,
how else is fraud defined?
As vice president, he prosecuted a campaign, a running mate, a political party campaign. That
he did not have the power to do that. But he told us that he's going to move this country from taxation to production.
Do you concede that some of the new taxes are taxes that have been put because of IMF negotiations and because of the current scheme of things we find ourselves? And so outside of that, it is really possible by 2025.
Is the vice president aware of that as well?
He is.
That the taxes are IMF conditional.
By 2025, we will be nearing the end of the IMF deal. Then he can take it off.
Kwaku, your position again exposes the fraud of the vice president. This is why. If the vice president is aware that it is not a case of the president, his boss, imposing a tax that he is just simply against, but because of IMF conditionalities, then the vice president is supposed to know that it is because it is beyond somebody, and the reasons for doing it is not a matter of policy positions.
Yeah, but
the vice president in any of his speech, he did not admit.
No, but you don't have to say that necessarily.
Why doesn't he have to say it?
You have to say that
the governance is for the public. He has to say it.
All right.
That, okay, the people of Ghana, These taxes have been imposed because of IMF conditionalities. Those conditionalities will no longer exist in 2025. And if those conditionalities do not exist, then the taxes can be gone.
Okay.
He now poses and passes off as a savior who, when he is elected, is going to remove those taxes. That is fraud.
Okay, Julius, hold it. Okay, Julius, hold it there for me. Julius, hold it there for me. Yamano, do you agree with the views Anthony has said? Quite strong views there about the conduct of the vice president.
Yes, Kwaku, thank you very much. I mean, I've been listening to Julius, and I will only advise that the use of certain words like fraud, sometimes because you cannot justify fraud, because there's no outcome from any proceedings from any court of competent jurisdiction or any findings that finds a person to be fraud.
Who said that?
Sometimes when making certain comments about public, officials or office holders, I think we should be a bit circumspect in terms of the way we communicate these things. I mean, the argument for the past week, I've been listening to lots of arguments on why a vice president cannot be considered as somebody who can become a better president. I think, it's a whole argument on its own. If you look at the U.S. politics, even, you can take President Johnson, President Truman, all these were vice presidents, even presiding at a time where, the economy of the United States was very bad, right? Same as we saw in Biden. I think, there's been a time where we've also had Vice President Mills. When he was vice president, the economy of Ghana was worse. Wasted period in Ghana's history. But he became a very, good president, achieving a single-digit inflation when he became president. So there are lots of issues to do with a vice president becoming a president. I think that I would want to comment on Julius's point on the fact that, the vice president has come to promise the takeaway of certain taxes, which he knew possibly he wasn't empowered to do. So in taxation, possibly there's a period or there's a time where the country needs to implement certain policies in terms of even tax policies so that we can achieve, economic development or achieve a target. And mostly, possibly after the phase passes out, those taxes could be taken out. You understand? So maybe, for example, e-levy, because we were facing economic challenges after COVID, right? We have the IMF imposition on, certain things. So possibly after the phases passes, the vice president has the right to say that I can take those things out. But it does not say that. And I think clearly the vice president did not also say that I disagreed with the implementation of an e-levy or with the imposition of a certain tax. But then he said taking off a tax is not the same as you disagreed or you agreed at its implementation. So if you ask me, I think that it's a whole argument on, be open to the intellectual debate and all those. But then, speaking to most of the things that the vice president said, I was actually, very happy hearing him say that he actually would want to build a very good digital economy and to make Ghana a digital hub. And one point that he actually mentioned that really caught my attention is the fact that his government, when voted into power, would want to train over 1 million youth in digital and IT technical skills. So I recall somewhere last year, I actually wrote a column on, I think, Asase Radio in Ghana and other places, why we have lots of Ghanaian youth working for big corporations in Canada, in the United States and all. These youth are able to do this because they have the digital skills to do so. In terms of software, coding and all those, we have great young people in Ghana working for great institutions. So if the vice president say that he would want to build 1 million youth like that, and Kwaku, you agree with me that in the next decade, our continent, like the continent of Africa, and that will definitely have a reflection on Ghana's population growth. The average age of, people will definitely be around 17 years in Africa, of which definitely will sink into Ghana's population growth. So if it is, the vision of a presidency to say that I would want to train 1 million youth, and we know that we are in the digital revolution world. We've had the Manchester industrialization past. This time we are in the digital revolution world, and the world needs, great minds to be able to solve complex challenges that we face every day. So I think that, it's actually a very good idea for me, because it's something that is generating crazy income for economies, right? If you also look at even the world population and how our growth has been, the world population is aging. China is aging, Germany is aging, Europe, everywhere you have average age being around 38, 42, 40. So if the African average age should be around 17 years for the next decade, and there's a policy like this to train us to have a foot in there when it comes to the digital revolution, I think it's a policy that I would want to applaud him for.
Good point that you make then. Before I come to you, Kwesi, let me go back to Alfred. And Alfred, if I look through some of the data you've been mining and the data you've been analyzing on your Twitter, a number of issues have come up. Look at the employment data that the Vice President put out, the taxes he talks about. First, I want to take your view on the digitalization, and that is where Emmanuel ended about what a big changer it will be. But if you look at the Vice President profile as has been put out generally in the lead up to the 2016 election and now, do you think the Vice President can really make a segue from really talking about the economy and being the economic voice that he has become known for to just be an IT, and you can box that with the employment figures as well as the taxes, and whether or not these are taxes we can just remove because of these IMF conditionalities?
Thank you, Kwaku. And I think there's something I want to clarify. The taxes themselves, like I keep hearing people say they are IMF conditionalities and all of that. The taxes themselves are not IMF conditionalities. I think it's something that we have to clarify. So what is happening is IMF says do fiscal consolidation, right? Reduce your deficit and don't accumulate debt. That is the objective. And like that's why in the introduction I said there are two main levers that you have to pull, and you do a mix of both. So the tax government said, okay, this is my medium-term revenue strategy. These are the things that I'm going to do to raise revenue. The other part of it is expense rationalization, and I don't think we have talked a lot about that. And I think we talk about the taxes and all of that. You have to think about the policy environment right now. After the cost of living crisis, after the DDEP, the Domestic Debt Exchange Program, businesses and individuals have lost valuable resources as a result of this restructuring of domestic debt. And then looking at this environment and introducing more and more taxes, right, as one of the levers that you are pulling in order to meet this target. Because really the quantitative performance criteria is the primary fiscal balance. That is the target. So all these ideas about the taxes are IMF conditionalities. In fact, it is the government of Ghana that developed its program, and then the IMF funded it. And one of the criteria that the government will be evaluated on is the primary balance. The primary balance has two ways that you change it. You either you increase your revenue, or you reduce your expenditure, or you do a bit of both. Government has focused a lot more on new taxes, given even within the current context that I've given. So that's the clarification I want to make, that the taxes are not IMF conditionalities. It is government that is using them as levers to try to address the whole idea of the primary balance needing to have less deficit. So that is that point I just wanted to clarify.
Sorry, I think I would also want to comment on that.
Yeah, Emmanuel, I'll come back to you. I want you to let Alfred make the point. I'll come back to you. Please hold your horses. Make the point down. I'll come back to you.
Yeah. So now back to the whole issue of the numbers and the digital economy and all of that. So I will preface that by saying that in the Ghanaian policy space, there's a lack of proper evaluation culture. And the reason I say that is is that, there's always the overarching theme is that politicians are generally assessing the impact of their interventions wrongly. And so, for example, digitalization. So the vice president has championed this. Very good. And I'm not saying that those don't have impacts. They definitely have impacts. I always question the magnitude of the impact, right? So I can give you multiple examples. I can start with the passport office. So vice president in his speech says that in 2018, the passport office made a revenue of 11.8 million cedis from processing about 347 applications. This is 28. This is the baseline that the vice president is using. And then, of course, in 2023, he says that down they are making, I believe it's like 90 million from about almost 500,000 applications that are processed. So then I was like, okay, well, let's verify that baseline. So 2016, 2017. In 2016, the passport office processed 350,000 applications and made 42 million Ghana cedis. In 2017, I only have partial data between January and September. They processed about 254 applications and made 29 million cedis. So the question as an analyst is, what happened in 2018 that even though the passport office processed about 350,000 applications, you only made 11.8 million cedis? Is it that the corruption got worse, or is the vice president understating the baseline so that it will make the impact of digitalization look good? That's a question that I ask. I can give you another example of ECG. So vice president says, ECG was making about 450 million cedis a month. After digitalization, it's now making 1.2 billion cedis a month. It's like, okay, let's check the data. Because if you look at tariffs, like average utility tariffs over the last year have increased by about 100%. So if utility prices have increased by about 100%, right? Can we reasonably say that because we did digitalization, that is why the revenue has increased? I don't think so, because the cost or the end user tariff has increased by about 100%. So even if we were making about 450 million cedis before that, which I even doubt that because the data doesn't support that. The data supports that they actually were making more than that. But let's use that for argument's sake. If you look at that, you've doubled tariffs. Of course, the revenue should increase, but right here is the vice president telling us that digitalization has increased that. So I personally don't have issues with the digitalization agenda. I just question the magnitude of growth that are supposed to have been recorded. Yeah. And that's just a common theme with every government sort of evaluation of interventions. Employment, you've seen me talked about the employment data so many times. Yeah. Vice President said we've created 2.1 million jobs. So the Vice President said that earlier in 2023, I think it was in May or something. I wrote an article about that. And then the data that he put out actually showed 2.3 million. So in the budget, the budget that the finance minister presented, he said 2.3 million. Yesterday or this week when the vice president spoke, he said 2.1 million. So obviously, even just within their own numbers, there's inconsistency, but that's just a minor point. My main point is that we have to triangulate data like that with different other data sources that are available so that we can really verify whether these jobs have been created. So one of the things, the Ghana Stats Service, in 2015, we did a labor force survey and we published the data in 2017. And then in 2022, there was other surveys that were done. Actually, the annual household survey was done every quarter. So when you look at that point, the difference between the number of people that are employed, and this is a longer time frame, 2015 to 2022, versus the vice president that's saying 2017 to 2022. But even in that longer time frame, the number of employed people was about 1.7 million. Now, remember, the 1.7 million is even employed in every sector of the economy, not just formal. When you look at the vice president's facts and data that was put out, which was basically just an Excel snippet that he posted on Facebook, it showed that a lot of those jobs, the jobs are from like ministries, departments, and agencies, and then the private formal sector. So 1.7 is what I'm getting between the difference in the longer time period, and he's saying 2.1 million. It doesn't add up. And that is one point. Okay. The other point is tax data, right?
Okay, all right. Alfred, please hold it there for me. Let me hear from Kwesi Boche. Kwesi Boche, Julius has spoken, Emmanuel has spoken, and Alfred has just spoken. And I'll go to Dr. Abner Boateng in a moment. How do you justify the vice president saying he is going to change all these things when he's the vice president, the second in command?
Thank you very much, Kwaku, and good evening to you and all my other co-panel members. Let me start from where my brother Julius also started by calling the vice president and his enablers, including Honorable Kojo Nkrumah, a fraud. I mean, Kwaku, sometimes when we get the opportunity to sit here to educate or contribute to the national discourse, let us not overemphasize certain things. How on earth can you call the vice president of the republic a fraud? On what basis? Do you know who a fraud is?
A fraud is someone who tells you something in the morning and in the afternoon.
With the greatest of respect,
without
I was quiet when
a change
you were
of
here.
circumstance and suddenly changes that.
I was very,
you asked a question.
No, I was very quiet. You would have your time to address the questions I'm asking.
That's a fraud.
Kwaku, has the vice president ever in any criminal manner deceived anybody? Fraud is a criminal offense, and that you cannot just wake up one morning or one evening and say the vice president is. You should be very thankful to President Akufo-Addo for abolishing the criminal libel law. Otherwise, after a year, you would have been at the nearest police station to answer questions. Now, moving on to the substantives. The vice president on Wednesday clearly did two basic things. First and foremost, what he did was that he mentioned his achievements as vice president and also certain things he intends to accomplish when voted into office as president. I agree. I mean, the vice president is part of this government and what have you. Touching on the taxes before I come to the other matters. Clearly, if you read the vice president's document at paragraph 124, Kwaku, the vice president mentioned that the emission levy and the COVID-19 levy, the gambling tax and what have you, have been imposed on Ghanaians due to certain conditions that we find ourselves in now. I am aware that people may have been tired of hearing about COVID-19 and Russia, Ukraine, but we cannot be oblivious of the fact that these external shocks have had dire consequences on our domestic economy. And so clearly the vice president stated that, with your indulgence, let me just quote what he said. He said, we're cutting government expenditure. The private sector undertaking expenditure that would normally be done by the government, and the new tax regime that will enhance compliance, broaden the tax base, and increase tax revenue. The situation we are going to face in 2025 is going to be very different from the situation we faced in 2020 and 2022. With the policy measures implemented thus far, we have outperformed the IMF fiscal deficit target of 5% of GDP by attaining blah blah blah. The new policies that I am proposing to implement in 2025 will give us the physical space to eliminate some taxes, such as the VAT on electricity, the emission tax, and the betting tax. So
the new policies he's going to implement. Why is he implementing?
Yes. So prior to in the preceding paragraphs, he set out the guidelines or the framework of why we have gotten to where we are now in 2020 and 2022. Clearly, it is because of COVID-19 and Russian-Ukraine war and other external factors. Or
you got there because in 2020 you were engaged in profligate consumption.
I was quiet when you were here. Let us give ourselves this respect, please. I was quiet when you were here. And so Kwaku, there are certain factors that has pushed us to be where we are now. And clearly by 2025, by the grace of God, I am confident, like the vice president is confident, that these shocks would have been over and Ghana would have been on a new path. Again, on the matter that the vice president is part of this government, yes, it is true that the vice president is part of this government. But Kwaku, you agree with me that the office of the vice president is a creature of the constitution. And the constitution has clearly set out what the vice president can do and what he cannot do. If you look at Article 60 of our constitution, it reads, there shall be a vice president of Ghana who shall perform such functions as may be assigned to him by this constitution or by the president. Some of the functions assigned to the vice president by the constitution, for instance, is being the chairperson of the police council and etc. However, all other functions that the vice president may seek to perform must be assigned to him by the president. If the president has not assigned to you as a vice president to perform any function, you cannot assume the role to perform that function. That will be gross insubordination, and that is total contravention of our laws. Now, in the vice president's speech at paragraph 63, he mentioned that when we assumed office in 2017, he decided that he identified the problem of digitalization, and he spoke to the president, and with the blessings of the president, he decided to pursue the digital drive of Ghana. Now, the basic question we should all be asking ourselves is that, has the vice president failed in performing or in undertaking the digital drive of Ghana?
Dr. Manibuama put out a long essay saying that all the things Bawumia is laying claim for are things that
and they are facts, well-established facts. They exist since 2016. Well-established facts.
As I proceed,
yeah.
Let us ask ourselves, has Bawumia failed in pursuing this digital agenda?
Well, what has he achieved? What has he achieved?
Clearly, Dr. Bawumia, today, you, Julius, when you were coming here, I'm sure you used the GPS app to get here.
The GPS
but today you are calling Dr. Bawumia a fraud. You are calling Bawumia a fraud.
What are you saying?
Because of Dr. Bawumia.
Why? Bawumia created the GPS app.
Julius,
no, is he saying here on record?
No, Julius, I think the mic, I've lowered the mic. Julius, hold on. Okay, so it's heated a little bit in the studio. I'll come back and we'll have a conversation in studio. Dr. Abnabuati, you hear from Kwesi Bochwe and then you've heard from Julius and all that. Do you listen to the vice president and really look at it and believe Dr. Bawumia can do the things he said he's going to do? Doc?
Well, thank you very much and good evening to all the listeners of Joey here. I would like to ask that we have a very sanitized conversation where we refrain from name calling and insults and have a very sanitized discussion for this evening. With that said, yes, I was present at the UPSA and I listened to the Vice President, His Excellency, Dr. Mahmoud Bawumia, who is currently the flag bearer of the MP, share his vision with Ghanaians. As an academic, my initial thoughts are that he did a very comprehensive presentation of what I would call his proposal, in the sense that I appreciated the background he gave, talking about the serious global and domestic crisis that we have had in the country that has resulted in the economic issues we have at this time. After the background, he also presented what we call in academic circles or in research terminology, the problem statement, where he clearly identified the problem we are facing as a country and how that problem is manifested or characterized. And after that, he went on to then present his vision, which I would liken to methodology and some recommendations of preliminary recommendations in likening it to a proposal. And so having done the background, having identified the problem for us, and also having told us how he would address the problems, I thought that he had done a very comprehensive work, and it goes to show that there's a lot of thought that had gone into the presentation of his vision. Now, I've listened to some of the conversations that have gone on in the last 2 days. And I want to emphasize that, as was being said by Kwesi, the Vice President, by the constitutional mandate, is to help the Executive President to achieve his vision. And so there are things he could do and things that he couldn't do. And there are things that he needed the president's blessings, as he called it, to be able to do them. But one thing that stands out for me is how he has consistently talked about digitalization. And he started as far back as 2010 in the book that he published. And he talked about this digitalization being one of the clear paths for Africa, and by that matter, for Ghana to be able to get out of the economic challenges that we have. I see that for a country like Ghana.
I think the question people want to ask is, the vice president was put out as an economic messiah. The vice president's wife, in fact, in the lead up to 2016 election, said the husband was an economic whiz kid. And so the expectation of people of Dr. Bawumia was more of economic than digitalization. And so people want to know why the sudden change or sudden shift to digitalization when the economy has taken such a nosedive.
Okay, so for me, if you had waited for me to finish, that was exactly where I was getting to. But I think in the way he presented his vision, he clearly showed how digitalization ultimately would lead to macroeconomic stability. So he's not taking a sudden shift. I think that as I started, when you identify a problem and you are interested in solving the problem or addressing the problem comprehensively, I'm a social worker. We have what we call a person in environment approach when we are dealing with issues. What we do is we don't deal with the issue at the time that it is happening, but we go back into the precedent factors that gave rise to the issue currently. And you address those precedent factors. And by doing that, you ultimately help to remove the problem or deal with it or mitigate it. And so I see, from where I sit, I think that the Vice President, His Excellency, and the flag bearer identified digitalization as one of the key things that we need to get a grasp on as a country in order to be able to have the economic gains that we are looking for. So if I may give some examples, through digitalization, systems are being put in place to raise revenue, to plug the loopholes in the system and stop corruption.
So I mean, these are like benchmarks. These are like a platform for the vice president to build on to develop the economy. I hear you on that. I know you are very busy, Dr. Abuna, but if you could hold on for a minute for me, I know you've taken off some busy schedule to be with us. I'll come back to you again. Julius, you've heard from Kwesi Bochu, you've heard from Dr. Abuna saying that the vice president, in fact, Dr. Abuna has actually given us a certain academic treatise of the vice president's speech, what he sought to do and what he has done now. And the digitalization as a linchpad to develop the country. Surely, Julius, you have no qualms with that. If you can do that in quite a sum for me.
Nobody has a problem with using digitalization. Indeed, before 2016,
before Julius speaks,
digitalization was already.
I think he wants to make some
intervention. Just a moment.
If you can do that, 15 seconds.
I want audience to observe how quiet I'm going to be for him to speak. And when it's my turn,
if I say something that you think must be put
no,
to strict
I'll have my time.
You are
That is what
okay to
gentlemen
bring it
do on.
You're not going to lie over here.
All right. As you can see, Andy Dosty has just come in for the library. So we have about 8 minutes. If you can just come around the table, do that, and then we can get into. Okay, Julius. So please get into your argument so that.
The point I want to be understood is this, Kwaku. Digitalization is definitely going to be a pivot around which development is going to be driven in this country. Indeed, digitalization existed in Ghana way before Vice President Bawumia dreamt of even contesting the presidency. He wanted to make a rather fraudulent claim over here that Ghana Post GPS or GPS was introduced by Bawumia in this country. GPS existed in this country as far as Google existed. The so-called Ghana Post GPS was a replica of the Google GPS, which existed way before Bawumia dreamt of contesting for president. And before Bawumia became vice president, eServices.gov was a government service platform where MMDs and departments and agencies of government, including all the ministries, were enrolled upon. When Bawumia became president, he simply changed the name to Ghana.gov. That's all he did. The platform existed. Indeed, even in John Mohammed's Green Book, you would have seen that platform over there. He used the term a one-stop service shop in his speech yesterday. It was the same thing that was used in the John Mahama Green Book. They were not even, having any iota of shame not to even change the language. They copied it ditto into his speech. And he was saying, and he's now claiming credit for it. This is fraud. Fraud is an act of government to take credit for. E.gov and all these things. When President Mahama did these things, they were not even part of the things he was championing around on his campaigns. But since Vice President Bawumia has moved from economy to digitalization and stealing things that he did not even do to credit himself with, because saying that you brought e.gov services to Ghana is policy theft. Vice President Bawumia did not initiate that. In his speech, he said, I initiated and supervised. That is false.
Yeah, but maybe
that is false.
Saying it,
he did not initiate. The initiation was done way before he became vice president.
Okay, Julius.
He only changed the name. That is not an initiation.
Okay.
And you see, when all these things are going on, we are calling them out. Don't say that we should not. And Vice President Bawumia made promises to us at a time where he knew very well. He doesn't know the Constitution more than Vice President Bawumia. He doesn't. Vice President Bawumia knows the Constitution more than him. But Vice President Bawumia was the one going around promising airports, promising changing things from taxation to production, making all these promises. Vice President Bawumia knew that more than him. And if the person who knew that more than him made those promises, and we are holding that person now to street proof, and you are telling us that we dare not do that, and you are reading Constitution to us.
Okay, Julius. All right, Julius, please hold on. Okay, good. Hold on for a minute. Kwesi, how do you respond?
No, if you want to go on personal tangents, we are going to go on personal tangents over here. There is nothing like arrogant presentation over here.
Okay, guys, Julius. Okay, guys, we have just 5 minutes. So if Kwesi can make that point 2 minutes, I can go on to my Zoom and phone lines, and then we can wrap it up.
If you go on the tangent of arrogant
the point is that
those things, I'm not
Dr.
Julius, hold on, please. Okay, good.
Out of cabinet. Clearly, EMT is not even a creature of constitution. EMT does not have any binding authority on anybody, not even the president.
Julius, please allow the gentleman to make his point. Great. Julius.
What kind of attitude is this? What is this?
Julius,
what are you doing?
Okay, good.
This is very uncivilized of you.
Guys,
yes, this is very uncivilized. Because I was very quiet when he was speaking.
Kwesi, can you make your point? Julius, hold on for a minute. Julius, please hold on for a minute. Please.
There is no proof that the NDC, clearly there is no proof that the NDC initiated the Ghana Gulf project. There is no proof to that. It was a sole initiation and it was supervised by the vice president.
Let him make his point. We'll find
the uniqueness.
Please let him make his point. Please, Julius, I beg you. All right.
The unique identity card, as enrolled by President Kufuor, between the space of 2009 to 2016, only 900 cards were issued to Ghanaians. Currently, 70 million cards have been issued to Ghanaians. The digital property address system. This was a policy or a project initiated by Vice President Dr. Bawumia, and clearly now it is in place. Again, the mobile money interoperability. Today it is working. This is a drive that was initiated and supervised by Dr. Bawumia. And again, the drone delivery services. Under NDC was there drone delivery services?
There was none. So Kwesi, is that all right? Kwesi, hold on. Kwesi, hold on for a minute.
Kwaku, just a minute. Dr. Bawumia is a man of vision. Dr. Bawumia is a man on his own, and no amount of lies by the NDC and their paid young boys would be allowed to disrupt.
Right. Thank you. Papani has joined me in studio with a number of comments that we can go through. Julius, please hold on. Papani, what are some of the comments that people have been sending us? If you can run that through that.
Wait, quickly, let's run through this. So this one, Godwin, connecting from Pillar 2 Dom, he says, so those saying Baumia's digitalization is the benchmark and must be commended. What about the one who saw the future and started laying the infrastructure to the backbone for this cause? Now, let's go to Tinkran, who says that the assertion that the vice president is completely innocent and never to be blamed for any of the failures of the current government is really never an acceptable one. Thank you very much for sending us that message. Final one here. I'm not able to read this
Okay.
one.
All right,
But
then-
yes,
then
okay,
I have
but
this.
quickly, let me. So it says that listening to Dr. Bema, I became dumbfounded as he dissociated himself from Nanado's led government, now promising to do away with e-levy and voted into power. Well, Baumia can be trusted. That's what the answer, and this is coming from
He didn't add his name.
David,
Okay.
yes.
Right, I have this. This one too does not have his name. He says, Kweku, tell the MPP guy he should stop defending Dr. Baumia. The vice president did not survive with economics and is seeking refuge under the canopy of digitalization. Even if a kangaroo was president, digitalization would take a normal 10. We are tired. Well, this is how we end the show today. It's been a really incredible conversation about the vice president's speech and how the country will be shaping up ahead of the 2024 election. It's a conversation that we would love to have a part 2 of if we get a time. And Alfred, thank you so much for your insight. I think you had a lot more you wanted to share. We'll get back to that. And Dr. Boateng, incredible positions you made to us, and we'll get back to it. Kwesi Bochue and Julius Anthony joined me in studio. Emmanuel Lampim was also on Zoom as well. My name is Kwaku Asante.